Welcome back to Books and Beyond with That Guy Jay. I am your host, That Guy Jay. This week we've got another solo podcast, but we're going to do something a little bit different. I've got some iced coffee here. I've got some questions that were asked to me on TikTok pulled up on my laptop, and we're going to do ourselves a little Q&A. And as always, if you could just take a quick moment to like, share, comment, hit any of the buttons, really. It goes a long way to helping the podcast get into the algorithm. But before we jump into the questions, first I wanted to show off a couple of quick decor changes to my podcast setup. I got this cool neon sign here. It says, read books, be kind, stay weird. Love the message. And then just to my left, I have a table with my record player on it. I finally got that hooked up so that I can start listening to records again. And up here, I got a nice little now playing shelf so that whatever record I'm currently listening to, I can throw up there. I think I'm going to use this for my setup when I go live on TikTok. Instead of listening to lo-fi, I can actually have some of my records playing. I think that'll be a much cooler vibe. And before we get into the questions, let's do a quick watch of the day. Today's watch of the day is the Casio MRW200H. This is a fantastic everyday watch. It looks similar to a dive watch. It has a bezel. It doesn't have a clicky bezel. It just rotates. It also has the day and the date, which is super helpful. And this is just another super affordable Casio that I love to mix into my daily wears. So why don't we just jump into the questions? I made a post yesterday over on TikTok asking for people to ask me anything. Some of these are about books. Some of them are about photography. Nothing was off limits. I got some fantastic questions. Thank you to everybody who asked questions. I appreciate your participation so much, but let's just get right into it. The first question is, if you could meet your favorite author, who would that be? I have a hard time nailing down favorites, but if I could meet one author, she's unfortunately no longer with us. I would love to meet Octavia E. Butler. She wrote my favorite book of all time, which is Kindred. She has written some amazing books. She is a pioneer, especially for women in sci-fi, and I would love to get to meet her and chat about all of the things that she's written. I think that she is such an interesting person. I think that her books are so fantastic, and I think it's so unfortunate that she passed as young as she did. She was still working on series. I think she had so many more stories left in her. And on to the next question. And don't mind me if I just look to the side a little bit. I've got my laptop over there on a stand, and that's where all the questions are. So let's see. Let's switch hobbies. Who are some of your favorite photographers? And I'd love to know more about your photography journey. All right, so I'll start with my photography journey. Photography started for me when I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I was lucky enough that my high school actually had photography 1 and 2 as electives. It was very uncommon for freshmen to get into photography. It was one of the more popular electives. I don't know how I ended up there, but it was such a fun class. We all got Pentax K1000s, which are very bare bones mechanical film cameras, and we got to learn it all. We learned the basics of photography. We also had to go into what were closets converted into dark spaces to actually develop our own film, and we also had a dark room where we would make our own prints, and it was such a cool learning experience. And I didn't do a ton with photography in the following years, but then I did take photography 2 my senior year. So I had a pretty solid gap there, but I got more into it, I would say, with photography too. I think I was a little bit older and appreciated it more. And after that, I was actually working at a video rental store back when those were a thing. I'm from a small town, so we didn't have a Blockbuster, but think something like a Blockbuster, but mom and pop. And half of the store was for video rentals and half of the store was a camera shop. So while I worked there, I used my discount to get a Canon film camera that was also all manual, and I wish I never sold that one, and I also wish I shot with that one more. I didn't use it a ton. But from there, after high school, I took quite a break from photography. I had point and shoots throughout my 20s, as everyone did in the 2000s. And then I would say I got heavy into it again, probably around 2012. My daughter was a toddler. I wanted to get better pictures of her, and I was in New York City, and I was out exploring all the time, and I wanted a nice camera to go with me. I started with a Canon Rebel T3. I quickly outgrew the limitations of that. It was already older when I got it, and I upgraded to a Canon 70D. I absolutely loved that camera. That went all over New York City with me. I had a cool 24 millimeter pancake lens, so I could make the camera as small as possible, just slip it in my sweatshirt pocket or slip it in a backpack. And my favorite hobby used to be just getting on the train and going somewhere random within the city, explore a neighborhood I've never been to, street photography, taking pictures of different architecture. I absolutely loved it. Now, after my injury, I didn't shoot for a while because I wasn't out and about very much, so I ended up having to sell the Canon 70D because I needed the money more than I needed a camera in my closet. And then now I'm just reconnecting and re-getting into photography as of my birthday back in April. An amazing group of people on Book Talk. I was actually able to buy a new camera. I got myself the Fujifilm X-S20, and I've been absolutely loving it. Basically trying to relearn everything that I used to know, and it's been a lot of fun. Now, in terms of my favorite photographers, I haven't always had a ton of favorite photographers. I would say in my early days, one of my favorites would have been Larry Chen. He is in the automotive space. He does a lot of photography and videography for different car events. He worked a lot with a YouTube channel called The Hoonigans that I watched very frequently, and I always just loved his style and loved the cars that he had access to taking pictures to. I would say more recently, this is like a new favorite photographer that I've just actually gotten into more within the last few weeks. Her name was Vivian Maier, and she actually didn't get discovered until after her death. In 2009 I believe is when she passed away, and a lot of her negatives were auctioned off to private collectors. And that's where people discovered that throughout her entire lifetime, predominantly in New York City, but also in LA and Chicago and some places around the world, she took over 150,000 photos. She never published them anywhere. She never really showed anyone. She set up a darkroom in her bathroom, and it was all just for the love of photography. And I think that she is one of the best street photographers I've ever seen. I think that her street portraits are probably better than anyone else's. She was truly just able to capture people's emotions in a single shot. A ton of her work is in black and white, and it's really cool to see old New York from like the 50s and 60s. And I am super deep into digging through her work, and I'm hoping to get her photo collection book at some point soon. It is on my Amazon wish list, so I don't forget about it. For anyone interested, there actually is a website set up for her, and it has a good sample of her photos, and it is simply just her name. It's VIVIAN MAIR, VivianMaier.com. And I have spent a bunch of time over the last couple weeks just kind of digging through her photos and looking at her composition and just trying to learn as much as I can from her photos because she is really incredible. All right, and let's see what we have next. If there was one book series you wish you could experience all over again, which series would it be? Now, this was actually a difficult one for me because I can think of several series that I would love to read for the first time again. But I think the one that stood out the most for me is A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. If I could wipe my brain of all of the times I've read those books and wipe my brain of the show and experience that now as a much more experienced fantasy reader, I think that that would be absolutely amazing. That was a series that got me into fantasy, and I loved it at the time, and I've reread it over the years, and I've loved it every time. But I think I would have an even greater appreciation for it now if I could redo it now for the first time. I think that that would be absolutely incredible. An honorable mention would be The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. I absolutely love that trilogy. Those books were so incredible, and I would absolutely do that one with a fresh mind again as well. What book got you back into reading as an adult? I think I have actually talked about this on the podcast before, but for me, this answer is very easy. There's one book that stands out clear as day in my head, and that is The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. I was not a reader, which I've discussed countless times on the podcast. Everyone's probably sick of hearing that, but that was the case. I was not a reader as a teenager, and I had about 4.5 months to kill from the date that I signed up for the Navy until I shipped out for boot camp. And all of my friends were in school. I was working part-time, and I had a ton of free time on my hands, and I kind of got sick of the video games that I had available. I didn't have cable, and everyone had been talking about the Da Vinci Code for over a year. It was like a cultural phenomenon, and I was like, you know what? Let me try this. Let me see if there is something to this reading thing, and let me see what all the hype is with this book. And I absolutely ate that book up, and I loved it. And then from there, I dove into the rest of his books, and I ended up getting into Harlan Coben and a few other similar thriller style books. But it definitely all started with the Da Vinci Code. I will always have a soft place in my heart for that book. I think that I think it was so fast paced. It was so interesting and kind of off the wall in some ways. But yeah, that was a really fun read. And I've been thinking about revisiting that one because I don't think I've read it in close to 20 years because I did reread it at one point, but well, maybe 15 years. But either way, I've been thinking about revisiting that because I had a lot of fun with that book. What has been your favorite episode you've recorded so far and why? This is also a difficult question because I have had fantastic luck with having some amazing guests on the podcast this early on. From the start, I think I've had great guests. I've had so many great guests. I've had a lot of fun with each and every one of them, but I think the one that stands out the most to me would be the episode I did with Evan Lycum. And I think the reason for that is I've been a fan of his for a couple years now. I've listened to his podcast. I've always enjoyed his content. And I've heard so much about his book, Angie Kills a King, from behind the scenes, where he even in his Discord, he gave some of us access to an early draft, and he kind of led us along the process where we got updates before TikTok. So we knew when he got a literary agent, and we knew when he got picked up by Tor, and we got to see the cover before other people. And there's just kind of 2 years of anticipation of that book. And I read the book and I had such a fantastic time with it. I think it is such a strong debut novel. And then within a couple months of him releasing his first book, I was able to have him as a guest on the podcast. And he's such a cool guy. He's very knowledgeable about fantasy, and he is just very down to earth and just super fun to talk to. It was a really great episode. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. He gives a lot of information about the process of getting the book out and some of and even his input when it comes to things like the cover art and things that he hopes to work on in the future. And it was just a really great interview. It ended up going about half an hour longer than most episodes do, just because we were so caught up in chatting books, and it was just a great time. Okay, and who would be your ultimate podcast guest, and what's the one question you'd want to ask if you only got one? This was difficult. I was thinking about this one all night last night, and I have said before that my ultimate podcast guest would be George R.R. Martin, and I wasn't sure if that applied to this because I wasn't sure if I could come up with a single question, but it would be him. That's who I would want to have on if I could have anyone on. And if I only got one question, and I think it would just be, does he regret at all giving up his world to the showrunners of the Game of Thrones show? Is there any regret for letting them take over the story and guide it in a way that, quite frankly, pissed off a lot of fans? Is there any regret there, or is he just happy that the show exists and that it was picked up? I would be really interested in hearing the answer to that. So, yeah, my dream guest would be George R.R. Martin, and I would just want to know if he regrets anything about the show. What books made you laugh, cry, and hide under the covers? This one was another one that I had to think about because there's obviously multiple books that can fit for each part of this question. And for which one made me laugh, I'll just go with a recent read from this month, and that was Carl's Doomsday Scenario, which is book 2 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I have seen some people say that these books are teenage boy humor, and at times they definitely are. And the jokes don't always land, but then there absolutely were times when I was laughing out loud while reading it, especially with how good the audiobook is. Hearing the AI of the world sing to the main character free ballin' instead of free fallin' because he got stuck wearing some boxers with little hearts on them and he can't change out of them. That whole sequence was absolutely hilarious. I loved it. I did actually laugh out loud for that part. And throughout the whole book, there is a ton of humor. And like I said, not all of it lands. Some of it is a little bit immature, but a lot of it is quite funny to me, at least. And what made me cry? There have been several books that made me cry. And I think the one that stands out the most to me is A Little Life. And I know that that book isn't for everybody. And I get why some people don't like it. And I can kind of understand why some people say that it's kind of like trauma porn. I don't necessarily agree. I think there is a whole lot more to the story. I think that there's parts of this book that are so painfully sad that they could make you cry. But I also think that there are moments within this group's friendship that are so beautiful that it could bring you close to tears as well. I think that it is such an interesting exploration of four guys' friendships spread out over the span of like 50 years, from when they're young adults all the way up until, they're getting older. And there was just so many heavy moments in that book, and there was also so many beautiful ones. I think the way that it all came together was really impactful, and that is definitely one that had me tear up. And it is also one of those books where when I finish, I kind of just had to stare off into the void, like, what did I just read? And as far as which books have made me hide under the covers, this one was interesting because a lot of books are very creepy, but I haven't read a ton of horror, so I can't say that there's been a bunch that outright scared me. I think that I would have to go with Misery by Stephen King. I think that Annie Wilkes is one of the most terrifying characters I've ever read. She is absolutely out of her mind. She's so frighteningly intimidating. She is kind of just evil, wrapped into this package of a unassuming middle-aged woman. That book literally had me at the edge of my seat as I was reading it, and there were so many points where I felt so uncomfortable, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next, but at the same time, like, I couldn't turn the page because I was so scared of what was going to happen next. That book really freaked me out on like a psychological level. It's not scary in the same way as something like by Stephen King as well, as he says his scariest book is Pet Sematary, and that book is also very creepy and is one I considered, but there is just something about there's just something about Annie Wilkes and the way that Misery plays out that is so unsettling that I had to go with that one. Okay, and next up, what book has spoken to something so scary close to your life that you still remember it? This was also another difficult one, and I think I thought about this one the longest out of all of the questions because I think there's a lot of books that I've connected to on a personal level, and the one I ended up going with is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a book that I've read multiple times. It's a novella. It's a very quick read. I've read it recently, so maybe it's recency bias. It's such a cozy read, but the message to it is pretty big. And the overall theme of this book is finding happiness within yourself and also finding your place in the world. It has to do with not knowing what path you should be on. It has to do with not knowing what your life's purpose is. Is there a purpose to life? What are you supposed to be doing? And I think that that's so relatable to everybody. I feel like I especially related to this one since my injury because it has been 8 years of kind of not knowing where to go next, what to do, how to do it, really not having any idea what the rest of my life was going to look like after that injury. And I'm just now within the last year kind of pulling myself together in a way where I'm figuring that out. So I think the message of that book really resonates with me. It is one that I recommend everyone read. I've recommended whenever someone says they're in a reading slump, I say they should read this book just because I think the message of the book lines up so well with getting out of a slump. But also, I just think it's something that everyone can benefit from this book. I think that the story is amazing. You can get through it in a day. And it is cozy. It's like drinking a warm cup of tea, but it is very impactful. So if you haven't read it, I definitely highly recommend it. It is a duology. It's called the Monk and Robot series. Book 2 is called Prayer for the Crown Shy, and it is also fantastic, but I don't think it hits quite the same way that Psalm for the Wild Built does. It is a great continuation of the story, but I think you could read A Psalm for the Wild Built, and if you wanted to stop there, that would be okay. But if you haven't read it, definitely check it out. All right, and then we're switching gears a little bit here. If you could only have one watch, sky's the limit on price, which would it be? Would this answer change if you could have three watches so that you didn't have to worry about one watch filling multiple roles? This is another one that I thought quite a bit about, and I came up with different answers. And then I had an answer in the back of my head the whole time, but it's so unrealistic that I kind of don't even consider it a Grail watch because it's so much money that it'll never happen. It's also an incredibly rare watch because there weren't a ton of them made. But the question does say one watch, sky's the limit on price. So we're going to go for the sky. I would go with the Patek Philippe reference 1518 perpetual calendar chronograph in yellow gold. The reason I would choose this watch is because of the complications. The perpetual calendar complication is so incredible. What a perpetual calendar does is if you set the time, date, and keep the watch running, it'll automatically be perfect on the day and the date. It can even account for leap years. It can account for months with 30 days versus 31 days. And it does this all through a series of gears within the movement. And on top of that, it also has a chronograph feature, which is basically a stopwatch. It has two very in-depth complications all in one. And the reason that I would choose this reference number out of all of the different versions of this watch is that this was the first one. This came out in 1941. It was the first serialized perpetual calendar to ever be made. They actually got rid of the chronograph for most of the history of the watch after this. It's an absolutely beautiful piece. There's literally only a few hundred of them, I believe. And there's some variations of this that are so rare. For example, I wouldn't even consider this because this is taking Holy Grail too far because I believe there was only 4 ever made in stainless steel. All of the rest were made in precious metals. But there's rumors that there's a stainless steel version that's going to be going for auction soon, and they're estimating that it's going to sell for $16 million. The standard 1518 in yellow gold, like the one that I would consider the Grail watch for me, you're going to be looking at upwards of $1 million, so it's still a pretty ridiculous watch. So much so that I felt kind of guilty having that as my answer. So I did come up with a backup answer that is more realistic because $1 million watch from 1941 is not super realistic for many people. The watch I'm going to say is also not super realistic for a lot of people, but by comparison, it is. And I would go with Moonwatch Professional Speedmaster in gold with the green dial. This is also like a $50,000 watch. It was for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, which is what made the Speedmaster famous because this is the watch that astronauts wore to the moon. I love the way it looks in yellow gold. I'm a sucker for a green dial. And then if we want to break it down to even more reasonable, at some point in my life, I would just like to own a Speedmaster. You can get some vintage ones for $2 or $3 grand. That could be doable someday. So I guess those are the 3 levels of my watch grails. The completely unrealistic, the pretty far-fetched, and then the one that's actually probably obtainable someday. All right, we've got a few questions left here. Where are some places you would love to photograph? Do you think you will branch into videos? I recently changed my answer on this. I thought I had an answer, but then I saw some videos from somewhere that I forgot about that I would love to visit, and that is the Faroe Islands. If you aren't familiar, the Faroe Islands are a series of islands. They belong to Denmark, and they are just so stunning. They have giant rock cliffs. They have very quaint looking villages. They have houses with grass on the roof. And more than anything, I want to take pictures of puffins, and they have puffins. So that fits very well. But they also have amazing waterfalls. They have super green grass, and it just looks like such an amazing place to visit in general. Before that, my answer would have probably been somewhere in Finland to see the Northern Lights, but I'm not at all practiced in astrophotography, so I actually don't know how that would work out. That would also be a very cool trip, but I think the Faroe Islands is my answer. And honorable mention would be somewhere like Tokyo. I love street photography, and going to a city that's even bigger and brighter than New York City would be pretty cool. And do I think I will branch into videos? Yes, I do think I will. I really want to. It's actually a huge goal of mine to get better at videography. That's actually why I got the camera that I did. The Fujifilm X-S20 is what people call a hybrid camera, where it's not necessarily the top of the top for photo or the top of the top for video, but it is very good at both of them. It has some fantastic video capabilities, some near pro level specs for some of the video that it can take. For example, for anyone who's into gear, it can do 6.2K open gate, and it has multiple different logs that you can film in color grade. And it's a very capable little camera. I don't know if videography will ever be the only thing I do. I think I'll always be a hybrid shooter. I love taking pictures too much to switch to a more video-centric camera. I think hybrid is always going to be the spot for me. I actually need to do a better job of taking clips when I'm out with my camera. I always just kind of get nervous and don't really know what to shoot, and I'm still figuring out the different settings, and I may need like an ND filter because a lot of days are too bright. But I think I need to start just taking clips, and they don't have to be good, and I need to just lean into the learning process of the only way to get better at taking clips is going to be by taking clips. So I need to take video clips, edit them together, even if I don't post them anywhere, practice color grading, practice my editing. Editing is another skill that I very much want to improve upon. I know how to do basic things in DaVinci Resolve now because of this podcast, things that I didn't know how to do a year ago. So that's cool. But I would obviously like to get better always. And that's one of my big goals moving forward with photography/videography is I definitely want to lean more into the video. I want to start using the camera for YouTube videos that aren't podcast related. I've done that one time. I want to make more of those, have some non-podcast content on the YouTube channel as well. So hopefully for the rest of this year and especially next year, I think that's going to be my big goal for 2026 is to improve my videography skills. And my answer would be the same for places that I would like to shoot for places that I'd like to shoot video, it would be the Faroe Islands because I've seen clips of the puffins on the cliff's edge and watching them take off and kind of diving towards the water is very cool. I'd love to get clips of that. And then recently I just discovered a new place that I would love to go for videography, and that's I believe it was in Northern Ireland, and right off the coast there are hundreds of basking sharks that are just breaching out of the water. That would be so cool to get on video. All right, and then our last question is from me. Nobody asked this, and it's something that I wanted to think about since I was thinking about different questions. So, what is my dream car? And that's a two-part question because, one, what is the practical car that I could actually use in my everyday life? And two, what is the wild, unpractical, super expensive car that I would want to have? And I didn't have to think very hard about this one because I've known this answer for quite a while. For a realistic, maybe could afford it someday, it's 4 doors and actually usable, I would go with the Audi RS6 Avant. This is a Audi sports wagon. It's all-wheel drive. They're incredibly fast. I think that the styling on them is amazing. And you can fit 4 adults in them and actually have usable space in the back. And to non-car people, it would kind of just look like a grocery getter. It's an Audi wagon, but it has 621 horsepower. With a couple of basic mods, these things are outrunning supercars. They are so cool. Now, in terms of cars that almost nobody can afford, and I will never be able to afford one probably, that would be a Koenigsegg Agera. These things look like spaceships. They have so much technology in them. I don't even as a gearhead, I don't fully understand how they're able to make as much power as they do. These are 5-liter V8s that make 1,500 horsepower. They are incredibly impressive. These cars have hit 300 miles an hour or near 300 miles an hour on roads. They're insanely impressive. The founder of the company, Christian von Koenigsegg, is just an interesting guy. He doesn't have a heavy engineering background. He just really liked cars and decided to start making them years ago. And he now builds one of the most impressive hypercars in the world. They are something special. I would love to sit in one, let alone own one. I have seen them in person, but I've never been in one. I cannot imagine the feeling of driving a Koenigsegg, and I would definitely want to do that if I had the money. That's going to wrap up this week's episode. I have 2 recordings lined up with guests, so the next couple episodes will have guests. I can't wait for you to see who the guests are. I think that they're going to be very fun episodes. If you don't follow me on TikTok, I would give me a follow there, especially with my new setup here. I'm trying to go live more often. On Mondays, I go live to talk about that week's podcast episode. And then 2 or 3 days throughout the week, I'm going live and doing reading sprints, which have been super fun. Get some reading done, get some bookish chats going, and I'm going to try and be doing more and more of that. As always, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your week to join me on Books and Beyond. Real quick, one more time, if you could just smash that like button, give me a follow if you're not already, and consider sharing this with somebody who might find this interesting. Have a good week, everybody. I will see you next week.